On a freezing winter night in Pine Ridge, Montana, I opened my door and stumbled into a sight I will never forget. Two Doberman puppies, Scout and Rook, huddled on the porch, trembling like dying embers about to fade. I scooped them up, wrapped them in my late husband's old wool blanket, thinking only of saving two small lives from the snow. What I didn't know was that moment would drag me into a storm I could never escape. By morning, the quiet cabin I'd lived in alone for nearly 20 years was surrounded. Red and blue lights slashed across the snow, police voices boomed commands, weapons drawn. The whole town whispered, "Why are the cops here?" What did those dogs bring with them? The truth that followed would shatter not just me, but an entire community. And I promise, you will not believe what really happened inside that small wooden cabin. Stay with me until the end, because the answer will crush your heart. That night, the wind screamed through the pines like an orchestra made of steel, each gust so sharp the wooden beams of my cabin rattled in protest. I was about to pull the curtains closed when another sound reached me, thin, fragile, almost swallowed by the storm. A whimper. Broken, desperate. A plea carried halfway before the wind devoured it. My old heart pounded hard, and before thought could catch up, I had already thrown the latch. At the bottom step, the moonlight revealed what froze me in place. Two Doberman pups pressed against each other in the snow. Their black and tan coats were stiff with frost, their breaths no thicker than thread, their wet eyes staring straight into mine. They were so small it seemed one more gust of wind would topple them forever. I didn't hesitate. I wrapped them tight in the blanket, pressed them against my chest, feeling their frantic ribs hammer against my skin. "Come on," I whispered, voice softer than the fire inside. "You're safe now." Inside, the heat from the stove curled around them, but their bodies still shivered violently. I laid them down on the rug, fed the fire until it roared, golden light flickering across their half-drooped ears. The larger one, I called him Scout, stretched his muzzle toward the warmth. The smaller, Rook, buried his head in the fold of the blanket, eyelids sagging, twitching at every whistle of the wind outside. I warmed a little milk, poured it into an old bowl, and set it by the rug. They hesitated, then hunger won. Tiny tongues lapped each drop, soft hiccups filling the cabin. I sank to the floor, laid my hand on Scout's chest, felt the thrum of his heart, like a tiny drum against my palm. Years of silence had dulled me, left me hollow. But in that moment, for the first time in so long, I didn't hear emptiness. I heard the ragged breath of hope. I almost laughed, seeing Rook with milk smeared across his muzzle, Scout pawing at my hand as if demanding reassurance. I reached to wipe their faces clean. And the cabin shook. Red and blue light slashed through the window like blades, shredding the golden calm of the room. I jumped, my teacup rattling off the table, spilling dark liquid across the wood. A loudspeaker split the night, harsh and metallic in the snow-filled wind. "Ma'am! This is the county sheriff's department. Stay inside. Do not move." Scout bolted upright, barking hoarse but fierce, his tiny frame taut with defiance. Rook hissed low, pressing against my leg, eyes blazing toward the door. I pulled the curtain just enough to see. Outside, 4 cruisers blocked the drive, lights pulsing across the drifts. Heavy boots crunched forward, rifles close at hand, clouds of breath rising in the cold. My chest clenched. Why? I had only saved 2 puppies. I had only opened a door in the night. Why was my cabin, silent for 20 years, suddenly the center of an armed standoff? 3 knocks pounded against the door. Slow, deliberate, certain. "Ma'am, open up. We need to confirm who else is inside." I clutched Rook tighter, my hand trembling, while Scout planted himself before the door, a growl low in his throat, ready to tear apart the silence that swelled outside. And then, unbidden, last night replayed in my mind. 3 knocks. The same rhythm, the same porch. Only then, it was 2 fragile lives begging to be let in. Now, it was an army of men with guns and flashing lights. I didn't know what waited on the other side. I only knew this. By opening that door last night, I had let a deadly secret walk straight into my life. The door cracked open. Cold air rushed in, carrying with it a faint metallic scent I didn't recognize. On the porch stood a middle-aged man, snow clinging to the heavy coat across his shoulders, a badge gleaming on his chest. Sheriff Colton Hayes. His voice rolled out steady, not harsh, but weighted with authority. "Ma'am, step outside." Slowly. "You're safe, but we need to talk." My hand shook as I held Scout close, while Rook clung to my leg. When I stepped out, red and blue beams sliced across my face, so bright I had to raise a hand to shield my eyes. 4 cruisers sat angled in the snow, wheels half buried. Figures in thick jackets moved carefully, their breaths rising in white clouds, hands already resting on their weapons. It felt like they were facing down a threat, not a 78-year-old woman who had carried 2 trembling puppies into her home. I only have the dogs," I stammered. "Last night they were shivering at my door." I brought them inside. That's all Sheriff Hayes didn't answer right away. His gaze flicked toward Deputy Aria Bloom, a young woman with sharp, bright eyes. She crouched, her flashlight sweeping beneath the porch boards. The beam caught on something. Her hand froze. Then she reached down and pulled up a scrap of fabric, dark, wet, stained with blood. The air hardened around us. Scout erupted in sharp barks, and Rook hissed low against my calf. Aria lifted her head, her voice clipped but quiet, just enough for me to hear. "Sheriff, blood." Matches the description from the scene. My chest tightened. "Scene." "What scene?" I whispered. Hayes turned back, his eyes shadowed. "Last night there was an armed robbery in Pine Ridge. The suspect was wounded. He ran into the woods. Blood and boot prints led straight here. To your porch." My throat turned to stone. The memory of those 3 knocks at midnight crashed back, clearer than ever. I trembled. I heard them." 3 knocks. I called out. No one answered. I didn't open. Aria straightened, her sharp eyes locking onto mine as though she had found the missing piece. Hayes studied me, unblinking. "And these 2 puppies, they showed up the same night?" I looked down at Scout and Rook. Scout stood squarely on the porch, ribs showing under his thin frame but chest pumping, eyes alert, fierce. Rook pressed tight against me, ears pricked, catching every sound. I nodded slowly. "Yes." When I opened the door, it was only them. No one else. Hayes drew in a deep breath, the kind a man takes when something begins to make terrible sense. His voice dropped low. "Ma'am, they may not just be strays. They could have been leading the way, or worse, left behind. By the very man we're hunting." The words cut through me like ice. I stared at the pups. They didn't understand the language, but their eyes never left the shadows beyond the line of officers. Scout tugged at my leg, nose pointed toward the trees. Rook shivered, not from cold this time, but from warning. The radio on an officer's belt crackled alive. A voice spilled out urgent, fast. "Sheriff, fresh tracks northwest." "Blood trail, too. The suspect is likely badly injured. We're tightening the perimeter." Hayes nodded sharply, signaling the team to move. Then he faced me again, his voice stern but not unkind. "Ma'am, keep those dogs close. They may be the key to finding him. And maybe they're the reason we came to your cabin at all." I clutched Rook against me, feeling his trembling heart hammer through his ribs. Scout held his ground at the porch, small eyes blazing, muzzle twitching toward the forest. Boots thudded against snow, red and blue lights strobed across the trees, and in that moment I knew. Last night I thought I had saved 2 fragile lives. This morning, they might have carried with them a secret deadly enough to burn the whole town. The officers flooded the porch, flashlights sweeping across every plank of wood, exposing corners I had learned to navigate with my eyes half shut. My little cabin had become a crime scene. Every worn chair, every faded rug seemed stripped bare under their beams. I stood by the stove clutching Rook, while Scout paced in front of the door, his small frame drawn tight as a bowstring. Sheriff Hayes signaled a team to search the perimeter. I heard boots thudding on the wooden floor, snow shaking loose from heavy soles, the radio crackling like static electricity. Aria Bloom circled the room, jotting notes, her eyes flicking between me and the 2 pups. I could feel their doubt pressing in, and I no longer believed this was just another cold night. "Ma'am," Hayes said slowly, turning to me, "if the suspect came to your door, he may have left something behind inside. Have you noticed anything unusual since bringing the dogs in?" I shook my head. "No, I just thought they were freezing to death. I wrapped them in a blanket and set them by the fire. I didn't see anything else." Before the words left my mouth, Scout barked sharply, a hoarse, cutting sound, then bolted to the corner where my old wooden cabinet stood. He growled, scratching at the floorboards. Rook broke from my arms, followed his brother, nose pressed to the base of the cabinet, a low whine rising from his throat. The cabin fell silent. Flashlights swung toward the corner. An officer stepped forward and crouched. When he shoved the cabinet aside, dust lifted into the air, revealing a pale red smear dried into the wood grain. I froze. Aria knelt, tugged on gloves, and dabbed at the stain with a tissue. She looked up at Hayes, nodding once. "Blood? Fresh." A shudder ran through me, my mouth dry as ash. "Oh God, blood? In my own house?" I stumbled backward, bumping a chair, its wooden legs squealing across the floor. Scout turned, his dark eyes blazing in the light as if to say, "We knew all along." Hayes tightened the strap of his glove, staring at me. "Ma'am, the suspect may have come right up to this door. He could have bled here, maybe even tried to get inside, and your dogs—" His gaze dropped to Scout and Rook standing between us. "They're reacting like they've tracked him before." My chest ached, not from age but from the truth curling tighter around me. Had those 3 knocks at midnight been more than the wind? Had someone wounded been on the other side of my old wooden door trying to slip in? Scout growled low, Rook's nose darting under the cabinet again. Then suddenly both pups snapped upright, ears rigid, eyes locked on the frost-glazed window. Rook let out a soft, eerie howl, a sound I had never heard from a puppy. The note silenced every officer in the room. The radio crackled to life. "Sheriff, fresh tracks north of the cabin. Blood trail still visible. Suspect moving through the woods, not far." Hayes nodded, motioned for his team to spread out. Before they left, he turned back, his eyes heavy on me. "Ma'am, you need to understand. This isn't just about rescuing 2 strays. From the moment you opened that door, you were standing in the center of a case, and they," he pointed at Scout and Rook, "may be the only witnesses who know exactly where he went." His words bored into me. The cabin I had always believed to be my safe haven now felt like a net, full of traces I had never seen. I pulled Rook close, feeling his tiny but relentless heartbeat drumming against my palm. Scout stepped closer, still growling at the darkness beyond the glass. And I realized I wasn't protecting them. They were protecting me. The wind screamed across the porch, driving flurries of snow through the cracks in the door. But the chill inside wasn't from the storm anymore. It was fear. Scout stood braced at the threshold, ribs sharp under his thin frame, eyes blazing into the black forest, a growl vibrating deep in his chest. Rook pressed his nose to the floorboards, whining low, then turned to me as if urging me to follow. "Sheriff," a voice crackled urgently through the radio. "Fresh blood trail heading north. Footprints deep." Suspect limping Hayes glanced at me, then down at the pups. "Seems these two are seeing what we're seeing." Scout suddenly barked, sharp and raw, then leapt from the porch, nose buried in the snow. Rook followed, tail stiff, legs pumping faster than I thought possible. I opened my mouth to call them back, but Hayes stopped me with a single firm nod. "Let them lead. They know the way." I stood frozen, the wind lashing my face, torn apart inside. I had brought them in only to save them from the cold. Now they were hurling themselves into danger. But in Scout's fierce eyes, I saw a certainty nothing could shake. The deputies fanned out behind, flashlights slicing through the pines, shadows stretching long across the drifts. I trailed at the rear, my heart sinking with every step. Boots crunched the ice, echoing between the trees, mixing with Scout's raspy barks and the hollow wail of the wind. Scout pushed ahead, nose locked to the streak of blood glinting against the snow, body taut like a creature born to track. Rook stayed close at his side, pausing now and then to lift his head, whining softly, scanning the woods as if every sound mattered. I had never seen such fragile beings move with the weight of soldiers. They stopped at the base of a massive pine where the snow was churned up, scattered like sand. Scout clawed furiously, barking in bursts. Rook whined, digging fast with tiny paws. An officer hurried forward, brushed the snow aside with gloved hands. Out came a soaked canvas bag, heavy with blood. Inside, a rusted pistol and wads of crumpled bills. "Sheriff!" the officer shouted. "Evidence from the robbery!" No doubt about it. All the lights swung to the bag. My heart dropped to my shoes. The quiet cabin I had believed to be a sanctuary was now the core of a crime. Scout kept growling, his gaze pinned to the forest beyond. Rook pressed against my knee, ears rigid, trembling at every faint noise the wind carried. Hayes crouched, pressing his hand into the snow, his face grim. He looked straight at me. "Ma'am, do you see? Without these two, we never would have found it." I knelt, laid my hand across Scout's back. His body burned hot, his shivers driven not by cold, but by urgency. They weren't finished. They were only beginning. Hayes lifted the radio, his voice sharp as steel. "Confirmed evidence. Suspect nearby. Tighten the perimeter. Nothing in or out of these woods." The radio fell silent. The wind rose higher, shrieking like a warning stretched thin through the trees. I clutched Rook close, flashlight beams breaking across my lined face like shattered glass. I whispered, not sure if to myself or to them, "You brought us here. But what waits ahead?" And in that moment, I knew what we had unearthed under the snow was only the beginning. The forest still held something darker, and those two small Dobermans were the only keys to unlocking it. We pushed deeper into the woods, the snow thickening underfoot, the wind striking my face in lashes of ice. Scout led at the front, nose pressed low, his small frame arrow-straight with determination. Rook ran alongside, whining softly now and then, glancing back as if to check I was still with them. Behind us, beams of flashlights cut long slashes across the ice-coated trunks. I heard the crunch of boots, the clatter of metal from rifles and radios. Inside me, each step thudded like a drumbeat, not from age, from fear. If he were truly close, what would become of us? Suddenly, Scout froze, a growl rising in his throat, ears sharp as blades. He scraped at the snow, claws raking deep. Rook barked, his voice echoing through the trees like the forest itself was throwing it back. Hayes snapped a hand signal, and the line of officers dropped low. The loudspeakers were silent now, only the sound of quickened breath held in the cold. An officer knelt, flashlight steady. On the snow stretched a dark red smear. Beside it, boot prints pressed deep, staggering, as if the man had stumbled while running. Hayes turned to me, eyes clouded. He's badly hurt. He's still here. My chest constricted. Scout strained against the rope knotted loosely at his neck, pulling forward with every ounce of strength. Rook whined sharply, nose quivering, then fixed me with a look so desperate, so urgent it felt almost human. We have to keep going. Now. We slowed our pace. Pine Ridge Forest at night was unnervingly still. No birds, no animals, only wind and the brittle snap of snow beneath boots. Moonlight fractured through branches, breaking the ground into jagged patches of light and shadow, the forest a giant chessboard full of traps. Each time the wind shifted, a metallic tang seeped through the air. Blood. No mistaking it. Scout pulled harder, Rook growled, their bodies quaking not from cold, but from the trail itself. My thoughts spun, breaking apart. I remembered the cabin just hours ago, the fire crackling, the small bowl of milk. Now all of it warped into a waking nightmare. Without warning, Rook barked and sprang back, growling sharply. Scout snarled, pawing furiously at the base of a pine. A flashlight beam swung down. At the roots lay a fresh streak of blood, not yet frozen, dripping into a narrow crevice that vanished into a dark ravine. My God, I breathed. He passed here. He's close. Hayes raised his hand, voice clipped, urgent. Quiet! Close the ring. If he's still breathing, he's desperate. The team spread, light scissoring across the trees. Scout trembled but didn't retreat, his back arched, a growl burning deep in his chest. Rook whined low, then lifted his muzzle toward the ravine, ears rigid, eyes locked into the void. And I saw them then, their small eyes catching the beam of light, glowing like twin green flames. In that moment, I understood. These were no longer helpless strays. They were the only eyes cutting through the dark. The radio burst alive. Sheriff, movement detected on the east side. Very close. Could be the suspect. My heart hammered wildly. I clutched Rook, felt his trembling body pulse against my palm. Scout lunged forward, gaze fixed, his throat humming with a low growl. Then he let out a short, sharp howl, an unmistakable signal. Hayes tracked the sound, then swung his hand to the squad. That's him. Get ready. He does not leave these woods. The forest held its breath. Snow stopped falling. The wind dropped away. Only my ragged breaths and Scout's hoarse barking filled the night. And in that suspended silence, I knew. We were standing at the threshold of the truth. We stood frozen before the thick stand of trees, where the blood trail darkened, then vanished into a narrow gap. Scout growled without pause, his small body quivering with tension. Rook whined low, eyes locked on that patch of darkness. Around me, I heard the heavy breaths of the officers, the cold snap of safeties being released. No one spoke, but everyone knew he was in there. Sheriff Hayes raised his hand. 2 deputies circled wide, flashlights cutting across the pines, slicing the snow into strips of white. The wind fell still. The forest grew so quiet I could hear my own heart pounding inside my ears. Then, a sound. The dry crack of a branch under weight. Heavy. Slow. Undeniable. Scout barked furiously. Rook let out a short, sharp howl, the sound tearing the silence in two. And then he appeared. A man stumbled from the shadows, his coat hung in shreds, one arm bound tight with blood-soaked cloth. His face was hollow, his eyes wild, darting in panic. In his hand, a flash of steel, a pistol glinting in the beam. "Don't move!" Hayes thundered, his voice rolling like a storm. Guns snapped up in unison, flashlights converging on the figure. He faltered, shoulders shaking, but his grip on the weapon held. I crushed Rook to my chest, feeling his tiny tremors beat against my own racing heart. Scout planted himself at the front, teeth bared, his frail body taut with defiance, a living shield between us and the gun. I knew one wrong move and blood would spill across the snow. The man staggered back half a step, eyes darting, searching for escape. A deputy tightened his trigger, the metallic click ringing so sharp I forgot to breathe. The air stretched thin, ready to snap, and from some strength I didn't know I had, I spoke. My voice cracked, trembling, yet it carried through the stillness. "Stop. Don't do this. You're bleeding. You won't make it far. You still have a chance, but only if you let go." Every gaze shifted to me, including his. For an instant his eyes wavered. Not just anger there now, but fear. Rook whimpered in my arms, pressed closer, as if lending me courage. Scout barked once, short and piercing, a command. I stepped forward, half a pace, steadier this time. "You are not alone. I can see it. If you have even a shred of will left to live, drop it." The moment held. The wind stirred, spinning flakes of snow around us like shards of glass. He trembled, his eyes flicking to Scout, standing fierce before him, then to Rook clinging against me. His arm sagged. The pistol slipped, clattering into the snow. At once, 2 deputies surged forward, dragging him down, locking cuffs around his wrists. Scout barked. Rook howled short, their cries rising like a victory call. My knees buckled. I collapsed into the snow, breath pouring out until my eyes blurred. Hayes strode over, his voice low, heavy with release. "Ma'am, you just saved us all. One word from you, and the blood never spilled." I looked down at the pups. Scout's head lifted high, proud. Rook nuzzled into my hand, his eyes bright with life. And in the quiet rise of my chest, I understood. I hadn't crossed this night alone. These fragile creatures had given me courage. The flashlights dimmed one by one. Only the cold blue moonlight remained, spilling across the trees. The wounded man was taken away, but I knew. My life had turned on its axis. From the moment I opened that cabin door, everything had begun. As the sirens faded into the pines, the forest sank into a strange silence. Only hours earlier, this place had been filled with the click of safeties, the crackle of radios, boots pounding hard into snow. Now there was only the faint whisper of wind through heavy branches, the pop of firewood in the stove, and the steady breaths of 2 puppies curled against my feet. I sank onto the porch step, my hands still trembling with the memory of how close blood had come to spilling. Scout stood tall at the edge, his small body rigid, eyes scanning the dark as though still on guard. Rook pressed tight into the wool of my sweater, warm breath seeping into my skin, his trembling heartbeat still caught between nightmare and survival. Sheriff Hayes returned, his steps heavy but sure. He handed me a small envelope, the seal of the county police stamped bright red. His voice came rough but honest. "Without you, and these 2, we wouldn't have ended it tonight. You didn't just save them, you saved us." His words left me hollow, but not in despair. For years I had thought I was only surviving days, with nothing left to give. And yet, with a single door opened, I had become the missing piece that stopped more blood from falling. By morning, the snow lay thicker, a pale light spilling across the forest. Reporters came from town, snapping photos, demanding details, their questions piling fast. I wasn't used to the attention, but when they bent down to stroke Scout and Rook, cameras flashing around their small frames, I realized these little lives I had pulled from the cold were now the tiny heroes. Some suggested they be taken to a shelter or find a family. I only smiled, my voice unsteady but firm. They already have a family. Scout lifted his head, ears half folded, eyes blazing in agreement. Rook leapt into my lap, pressing his muzzle into my shaking hand as though sealing the promise. Laughter burst among the reporters, shutters clattering like applause. That night, when the crowd had gone, the cabin returned to quiet. But not the empty quiet I had known for years. It was filled now, with small breaths, soft barks, the scratch of tiny paws against the wood. I sat in my old rocking chair, staring out at Pine Ridge, swallowed in silver snow. Scout sprawled by the fire, chest rising steadily. Rook lay with his head on my knee, eyes drifting shut, his tail flicking gently with each breath. I remembered the years alone. Nights when the fire crackled only for me, the wind howling through the trees like a cruel reminder. The rocking chair opposite mine sat empty, a silent proof that my life had ended with my husband's. But now the emptiness was gone. It had been filled with two steady heartbeats, two sets of shining eyes, two fragile yet unyielding spirits. And I wondered, perhaps they had been sent for me, to remind me that life has its way of returning, even in the harshest winter. I poured tea and set a small bowl of warm milk beside it. Scout lifted his head, tail wagging hard. Rook barked once, soft like an answer. I laughed, an unguarded laugh I hadn't heard from myself in years. Tears fell, not bitter anymore, but warm, alive. That night I whispered, "You didn't just save me from danger. You saved me from the loneliness that had eaten away at every year." Scout stretched forward, laying his muzzle across my leg. Rook burrowed deeper into the blanket, and I knew. They understood, in their own way. The next day, Hayes returned. No flashing lights, no radios. Only a box of cookies from his wife and a message. "The whole town thanks you." He bent, stroked their heads, his eyes softening. "They aren't just witnesses. They're heroes." I looked at him, then at the two pups, their tails thumping with joy. And in that moment, I understood something simple, something so profound it almost broke me. From this day on, I would never again call myself alone in Pine Ridge. I had Scout, I had Rook, I had a reason to wake every morning. At dusk, I sat by the window, firelight casting a gentle glow across the room. Outside, the forest lay quiet, heavy with snow, but inside, life had returned. Two sparks, two tiny hearts, had lit the winter. And I knew the moment I opened that door had not just changed their fate, it had saved the rest of mine. Perhaps my story, with Scout and Rook, has stirred something in you, a memory of your own, a time you could not turn away, a small life you once reached out to save, or a moment you realized that your kindness had changed something more than you imagined. If you have lived through it, share it in the comments, because perhaps your story will be the one to warm another heart. Thank you for staying with me to the very end. If these moments touched you, please subscribe and share. Every time you do, another small life has a chance at a home, and another person finds a new meaning for tomorrow.